Namaste and welcome everyone. This is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by HinduPact, and HinduPact is the policy research and advocacy collective of World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA. Hindu Lounge generally comes live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific. But today it's an unusual day. It is a very special day. It is September 11th, and it's the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And we are doing a special show on Saturday. And as always, with me is Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsav is the executive director of HinduPact, and I am Ajay Shah. I'm the president of World Hindu Council of America. We generally talk about contemporary American issue, but today is a day which is a really special day. It is a day when over 3,000 Americans were killed in a terrorist attack when the terrorists flew their planes over the Twin Towers, and one of the planes they were probably go and fly, and bomb either, and one of them was on Pentagon, of course, and one was either headed towards the White House or the Capitol. We don't quite know yet. We don't know quite which one, but it would have been a significant target when the brave people of Flight 93 actually, gave up their life, brought down the plane in rural parts of Pennsylvania. But it is a special day for all those people who lost their loved ones, and we are really fortunate to have Kishan Sarkar with us, and who lost his father 20 years ago in 9/11. So, and of course, today we also have Adelle and Nazarian with us, and I will have Utsav introduce both of them. It is also a day when, several years ago, over 125 years ago in Chicago, Swami Vivekananda brought the message of Hindu Dharma and the universality of the Hindu Dharma to Chicago's World Parliament of Religion. So it's very telling that on 9/11, the message of peace, message of hope was brought to America, and the other 9/11, 100 years later, a message of violence and a message of terrorism was brought in America. And therein lies really the difference between the kind of philosophy that we practice and some of the people following some other faiths practice. With that, let me welcome Utsav. Utsav, please take a moment, introduce our guest. But before I do that, Utsav, I want to express my condolences to you. I just about 4 hours ago, Utsav lost his father. And I told Utsav many times that please you do not have to be here today. And Utsav is still here. I cannot imagine what he's going through today. It is, I feel very sorry for your loss, Utsav. I don't really have any words. I'm at loss of words to really say anything I want to say. But I'll just not say much. But all I want to say is from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of World Hindu Council of America, HinduPact family, I just wanted to express our condolences and stay brave. I know it's not easy. With that, to you, Utsav.
Well, thank you, Ajay Bhai, and thank you everybody for joining us. So September 11 is a tragic day in our history, and I guess it was meant to be personally also that way for me. So we are going to go to the next slide, and we would all keep 2 minutes of silence for the victims of the 9/11 attacks that happened 20 years ago. So let's all have 2 minutes of silence, and after that we will start the show. And I would introduce our guests because they really have both personal and educational stories to share. And hopefully we will look forward to a very informative event. So let's all have 2 minutes of silence. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So let me introduce you the speakers today. And we have Kishan Sarkar. Kishan tragically lost his father on the fateful day. Kalyan Kumar Sarkar, who was in the North Tower when the tragedy happened. And Kishan has been a human rights activist, a voice for the Hindu communities and the downtrodden communities around the world since the day he could express his views. And Kishan has been known to me personally for over the last 6 years. I have interacted with him on different issues concerning the human rights of subaltern communities around the world, the human rights of Hindus in Bangladesh, in the Indian subcontinent, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, as well as in America. So Kishan has been a strong voice, and he has been a friend of the community, a pillar of support. So thank you for joining us, Kishan, on this day. We also have Adelle Nazarian. Adelle is a journalist and a fellow of the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Her work has been noticed, her work has been presented on national security, foreign policy, human rights, and religious freedom. And she has been a very loud, vociferous, and informed voice of the Hindu communities around the world. And she has been a friend of the community, a sincere supporter. And I have to tell you that, you know, if you follow her on Twitter, you will see the passion, the information, and the knowledge she brings in support of the community. And thank you so much for joining us, Adelle, today. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for organizing this really important event. And again, my condolences to you and your family.
Thank you. And of course, we have Ajay Shah. Ajay Shah and myself, we do the HinduLounge show every Sunday. But today, because we wanted to join everybody on September 11th, so we are doing the show on Saturday. And Ajay Shah he's everything that you can imagine an activist, a scholar, and an organizer can be. And I have known Ajay Bhai for the last decade. It's been a privilege to work with Ajay Shah for the HinduLounge show and all other activities concerning Hindu Pact and World Hindu Council of America over the last few years. So thank you, Ajay Bhai, for joining once again. And you know, we learn and share far more behind the camera, before we start the show, and then we do the show, and we spend hours preparing for it. So thank you for putting all the effort, Ajay Bhai. And so with that, we will go to the next segment, and we would just want to bring to view the names of all the victims, the American Hindu victims who passed away on September 11 in 2001. And nearly 8% of the victims that day were of Hindu American origin or Hindu origin. Many of them may not have been Americans also. And you know, the good thing is that even though we are talking about these 8% people who were from the Hindu American community, we all remember everybody who died there in the Twin Towers, because they were all Americans, and they were all people who gave up their life for the cause of humanity. And that's the reason why we are having this show today, because what happened in September 11 was not an isolated incident. It was a war on America that has global implications, as we saw in the last 2 decades. And as you will see in the conversation today, it's not over. In fact, in my opinion, history will look at September 11 as a critical nodal event that will have implications centuries down the road. And one of the reasons why we are having this show today is because, as you know, people are remembering the people from 2 decades ago, what happened 2 decades ago, we are also looking at things that are happening right now. And there is a strong sense of understanding amongst the people that, you know, the events of September 11 never went away. It impacted people in every corner of the world. The people who perpetrated it continue to perpetrate crimes against humanity around the world in different forms, against different ethnicities, in different ways. So what was a violent attack on the Twin Towers that day have translated and morphed into other forms of violence, intellectual, physical, and in many cases, it has led to a dehumanization of communities around the world. And just to give you an example, as we speak today, on these tragedies that happened 20 years ago, there are conferences being organized in American campuses targeting American Hindu communities on this day. So, we will just go through this show and discuss some of those implications and what are the future implications of these kinds of events and how it impacts us. So, Ajay bhai, would you like to start with the original topic of discussion, which is what happened 20 years ago? And would you start with that, please?
So everyone who was at least a teenager has memories of where they were, what they were doing on 9/11, and a lot of people, I was in California, and I did not know people who were personally who were in the tower, but I had a lot of relatives who lived in New Jersey, New York, etc. And they, I know that, it was a life-changing moment for them, but obviously nothing as significant as what Kishan Dai here has gone through and seen. Not even close. I mean, they walked for hours to get to New Jersey or something or the other, right? But it's not on the same scale. I remember I was working on, our HinduNet at the time, initiative, and I think I had gone to sleep at around 2 a.m. and in West Coast. And so when I woke up in the morning, I looked at Drudge report and it said planes hit Twin Towers. So first plane hit Twin Towers, and I thought, somebody hacked Drudge website, because Drudge report being a prominent website, it's always, all websites are under constant hacking attacks. So I thought it was a hacking attempt. And then I said, this really can't be true. I mean, come on, how is a plane going to fly? And then so I went to some of the, other news websites, and I started thinking, this is actually real. And then turned on the TV, and then I saw the second plane hit. And then all the thoughts kind of started racing through my mind as to, wow, there must be, these are the biggest buildings. What are the, there must be a lot of people, even though it was early in the morning, there must be a lot of people already, because the workday in East Coast has already started. And I remember going to work with Sada, and everyone is just at TV and stunned. And we could not put this in, it just, nobody can fathom the events that were taking place. And so that memory is always etched in the mind. And then when you start learning more and more about who the perpetrators were and why they did that, and if you look today, looking back, I would in some ways argue that they actually achieved what they set out to achieve. Especially when you go back and look at the events in Afghanistan in the last few weeks, they made a lasting impact on the history. And that's what they started, they wanted to achieve. The rest of the world has not yet figured out how to deal with that. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. And I remember I was freshly out of school and had just started my job. And I went into work and saw what was happening on news. And I remember telling a friend that this is a terrorist attack. I remember he was an Argentinian who used to work in my architectural company. And he said, why do you think it's a terrorist attack? And I remember telling him, I come from a part of the world where we have been facing this for 1,000 years. And he later on, a week later, took me out to lunch and said, I don't know what you were thinking, but you were right. And because in those, at the moment when this was happening, people were thinking it was a two-seater plane. People were thinking it was a plane accident. Nobody could imagine what was actually going on in the first couple of hours. But I would like to go to Kishan, because Kishan went through this at a personal level and it changed your life forever. So Kishan, please tell us what you remember from 20 years ago.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you again for having me on and allowing me to share my personal story about 9/11. Of course, we all the victims of 9/11 have their own stories, and I appreciate the ability to share mine with all of you. Well, first of all, I want to start off with a little background about my father. Both my parents are Bengali Hindus who legally immigrated to the United States in the 70s. I was born in the 70s in Chicago, Illinois. Little bit of history about my father. My father is from the Howrah section of Kolkata or Calcutta, however you want to pronounce it. Bengalis call it Kolkata. But basically, my father was born at the time of India's partition. So that had a big impact on his life as well as my grandparents. So my father was a unique individual, in my humble opinion. He was the son of an army captain who turned MLA. And for those of you who don't know MLA, that's very similar to a House of Representative member here in the United States, who ended up leaving politics and becoming a headmaster, which is the equivalent of a school principal here in the United States, or school superintendent, depending on how you look at it. So my father's upbringing was that of a strict disciplinarian because of what he had to go through, and perhaps because of the extreme poverty that many of you in the older generation have experienced, that helped him to shape his worldview of being unafraid to take on any type of conquest almost. And just to put that in perspective, he left India where he had grown up all his life. He had studied, done his master's, to come to a country where he really didn't know anything. And ironically, he didn't come the traditional way of getting on an airplane and coming into the United States. He was actually accepted into Stanford University. Unfortunately, my grandfather at the time had just put my aunt, who is my father's elder sister, through medical school in India, and they really didn't have the money to send my father the funds for Stanford University's initial tuition. So at that point, my father made a decision to actually leave India on a merchant vessel, leaving the port, Calcutta port, or the port in Calcutta, and work various odd jobs until he reached Germany. His stay in Germany was very short, but he managed to learn enough German to survive and subsequently leave Germany to Canada, where he had an uncle who helped him pursue an advanced degree at Ottawa University. And upon graduating out of Ottawa University, he received a job offer in Chicago, and that's where his entrance into the United States came to be. While he was doing the job in Chicago, he ended up pursuing a PhD at the University of Chicago. And at that time, my grandparents requested that he do the arranged marriage, and life went on, right? So by profession, my father is a civil engineer. On that day, 9/11, and there's a lot of history before that, but I don't want to monopolize the time. But on that day, my father had left that morning. He left very early to catch the train from we lived in northern New Jersey, so he would just take the train right into the city. So I did not see him that day. I actually had just come back from Memphis 2 months before. I was working in Memphis, and I took a new job closer to home, or a new position rather, closer to home. So during the day, I actually afterwards went out, and I was in Secaucus, New Jersey when the first plane hit. And as Ustav mentioned, at the time that people were very confused, there was a lot of disinformation going out. So I didn't really think anything of it because I knew my father had survived the 1992 bombing. For those of you who remember, there was another attack on the trade towers, but it was not as I guess severe as what happened on 9/11. So my father worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as a civil engineer. That was his full-time job. And getting back to my point, I didn't think anything of it because he had gone through the 1992 bombings. He helped with the cleanup and everything surrounding in the aftermath of the 1992 bombings. Of course, then the second plane hit, and people were really confused. My mother had called me to tell me she had just spoken with my father, and she mentioned that your father said that it felt like an earthquake hit the building and everybody fell out of their chairs. And he said that, don't worry, the Port Authority has advised that the situation is under control and do not panic, do not leave the building. So I'll be fine, don't worry about it. So basically a few hours went by, well, I should say a few minutes went by, and then we realized the towers collapsed. My mother at the time panicked and came home. My boss called to check on me and see if any of us were affected. And I informed him that my father was in the North Tower, and although my mother had spoken to him earlier, we did not know his status. So my boss advised me to go home. And excuse me. And since I was finishing up a project at work, I told him that I would do so when I was done. And I just want to let you know, in addition to his full-time job, my father was an adjunct professor at New Jersey Institute of Technology and New Jersey City University. So I had to let the university know that, what the situation and make them aware. In fact, one student responded to the email that I had sent out to the faculty and to the students that he was teaching, and responded that he had been called to active duty and would always remember President Sarkar. So the next, as I'm sure most of you remember, the next few days were kind of a lockdown as New York City struggled to reopen, while the realization hit that, yes, we were the epicenter of the first terrorist attack on American soil. Of course, my father, being the individual that he was, we would know that he would make every attempt to let us know he was okay or something to that effect. But of course, he never returned. There was no phone call, and he simply vanished. Sorry. So my boss at the time told me to take time, and he had me covered. And 20 years, but it feels like, every time you remember it, it feels like yesterday. My boss at the time told me to take time, and he had me covered. Friends and community members banded together to help organize search parties to help find my father, and I'm sure other 9/11 victims were doing the same. Sometimes my mother and my brother would go into New York City to search the hospitals, to put up flyers, while I would stay home and call and wait by the phone. Other times I would go into New York City and go into the hospitals to see who the victims were, if they had my father's name, put up flyers. I remember going into police station, putting up flyers. All around the city, we were just putting up flyers and trying to find out any information we can. If weekdays felt like weeks felt like years. It was just a very agonizing time because we just did not know. Not knowing was probably the killer in this situation. And I remember at one point when I returned from a search a few weeks later, my mother and brother were waiting and asked me, well, did you find out anything? And I blurted out, I don't think Dad is coming back. And my brother, who's 12 years younger than me, so he was a teenager at the time, he was so mad that he punched the wall and ran to his room crying. And of course, my mother yelled at me, and I was just trying to tell her that, I'm being realistic because it's been weeks now and we have heard nothing and we can't find him. So I decided to return back to work simply because I just needed to divert my mind. And a few days before my birthday in October, my father's boss came to our house, and my mother called me immediately and told me that to come home. And I guess I instinctively knew that this was not going to be good news. They had found my father's body through a DNA match sample that I had provided the 9/11 investigators a few days after 9/11. Because he was an employee of the Port Authority. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey had taken care of the funeral arrangements. And of course, the funeral home, it was a closed casket because the body was so mangled. I remember begging the funeral director to let me see the body, and he refused because he said, listen, the body is just too mangled. Remember your father the way he was, and he pointed at my father's picture. So friends and the family and the community once again banded together. We actually took the casket around our home in New Jersey. And I remember my little puppy, which I brought back from Memphis, and that's a long story. But my father never liked dogs, but he actually became best friends with my little puppy. And my puppy was crying. And he would not leave. He just wanted to sit next to the coffin, and he would not move. So we did a 2.5-day closed casket viewing. People I barely remembered visited and paid their respects. The administrative executive from NJCU they informed us that the school, New Jersey City University, where he was an adjunct professor, informed us that the school would create a scholarship in my father's name. So long story short, as the elder son, it was my duty to perform our father's last rites per Hindu customs. We cremated the body, and my mother was given the ashes, which the following year we spread in the Ganga, or the Ganges River. And that pretty much sums up. My father was a tough individual, a hard man. I'm proud of him because he came from nothing. I left everything that he ever knew to take a chance in a new land. He faced an almost impossible task that perhaps today's youth would be running for the hills for. And my father taught me many things. He taught me to overcome adversity, to roll with the punches when life is not fair, to learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward despite come what may, and to never give up. So my father was one of the almost 3,000 victims of the 9/11 terror attacks. Radical Islamists cheered the deaths of the innocents that day, and the same media who the same media who now denies this. I remember them showing how several Muslim communities in Patterson, Jersey City, and throughout the boroughs of New York were dancing and relishing the havoc and destruction caused by radical Islamic terrorists. In the aftermath, we even learned about various Muslim professors who kept preaching and defending the actions of the 9/11 terrorists. But the good thing is, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the country seemed very united against radical Islamic terrorism. And unfortunately, as the years have passed, the radical left and their partners have managed to degrade the significance of radical Islamic terrorism. But it is real. Radical Islamic terrorism is real. And such beliefs are not conducive to a free and progressive society, as those beliefs only allow for a superiority of one school of thought, and as such, it becomes tyrannical. We only have to look at how the Taliban treats women and minorities, how ISIS brutally decimated Christians and the Yazidis, how Islamic terrorists throughout the world attack other religious minorities and even Muslims who do not adhere to their system of belief. And history keeps showing us that radical Islamic terrorism is real, and the radical left needs to stop ignoring that fact and trying to rewrite history. So again, I appreciate you allowing me to share my story and my thoughts about violent Islamic extremism. And again, my story is just one of many of the almost 3,000 victims on 9/11. And I apologize for letting the emotions out. Sometimes, it's like I said, it's been 20 years, but when you start thinking about it, it feels like yesterday. So thank you very much.
Christian, that was such a powerful personal statement. I cannot even imagine what you went through, and you're still going through. This cannot be easy, and we so appreciate your coming and sharing your story, as difficult as it is for you to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would like to ask Adelle, what are your experiences going back 20 years? Because, everybody came to this event from a different point of time in their life, and everybody had a different experience because everybody's born at a different time, at a different place, and had a different story they have to share. So what was your experience, and tell us more about how it has framed your worldview thereafter.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you again, Kishan, for your bravery. And I could see, your words really moved me. I know that it's been 20 years, but I know all too well that the pain never goes away, and you kind of learn to deal with it and live with it. And for anyone here who's ever lost anyone, it doesn't get easier, but you find a way to cope. I think that's the way that it can be described. For myself, thank you. As for myself, I was born in America. My parents immigrated from Iran. Sorry, at a very young age. And I was actually in history class in high school when 9/11 occurred. And I was, we had, in the morning, we had the top left-hand corner of every classroom TV screen, where we would have the morning show that occurred, a little, AM Wired, it was called. And I recall, I think it was Fox News or CNN that had some major news network was on that day, and it showed prominently that we had been attacked for the first time. A terrorist attack had taken place on American soil, and I was really shocked. I was absolutely shocked, and I couldn't believe what was happening. And we lost a few family members. Sorry, not members. Sorry, I call it family because some of my colleagues, my fellow classmates in Livingston High School, had lost their relatives, and so we really mourned collectively. And one loss is a loss for it's like a whole world has been lost, and the unimaginable pain that occurred, something that can't even begin to imagine. But it was shocking, and having seen my own parents experience leaving Iran, luckily they were able to, they didn't have to escape themselves, but they had relatives and friends who did escape because of, a radical Islamic regime that, persecutes people who are of different minority faiths, that have views that are different than theirs, don't adhere to their worldview. I had heard firsthand stories from many relatives and friends And they came to America seeking a better way of life, much like Kishan's father made that, sacrifice at, in his life to make sure that his children would have better opportunity. And my parents were younger; they're 12 and 15 when they came, but still, those stories they shared with me were really, they really struck a chord. And having, lived through the experience of 9/11, it really also shaped my worldview and made me feel that I had to step up and get involved in this fight, because the fight is far from over, as we all know. And unfortunately, the prevalence of radical ideologies, Islamic, the radical Islamic terrorism, it's unfortunately very much alive and well. And Afghanistan, of course, is with the Taliban currently, which we've seen over the past 20 years, they have not done anything to curb their behavior. They have, in fact, shown their devotion to the same radical belief system that has governed them since their inception. And they are even more emboldened than ever before in wanting to carry out their version of an Islamic caliphate. And so now we see that, countries like Iran and Pakistan, unfortunately, where they are the ones that stand to benefit, I think, from this, the Taliban's resurgence in a country like Afghanistan. And I'm sure everyone here is aware, but the Taliban even declared September 11th today as the day they're establishing a new government. And that is a big, big message to the Western world, and to those who are the friends of the Western world, to Hindus, to Christians, to Jews, to anyone that does not follow the Islamic Sharia way of thinking. And I will also point out that, the first victims of radical Islam are Muslims themselves. And I'm very happy that, Kishan, you mentioned that in parts of New Jersey, where I'm from as well, originally, there were people in Patterson, there were people in parts of the state that were celebrating. And you're absolutely correct. The media did not give airtime to this. And today we find that there's this still alive and well, unfortunately, red-green axis, which is the radical left and these radical Islamists. And they've teamed up all throughout the Western world, and they're currently actively seeking to undermine the democratic values and principles that are the reason that so many of us are able to live so freely and have such a blessed existence here, despite all the hardships. And so that really, really helps to shape who I am today. Just to answer your question, I think that, if I may shift a little bit, I will add that I think the decision to withdraw the way that we did from Afghanistan was a travesty. And unfortunately, the withdrawal from Afghanistan did damage America's credibility. And it's been so painful for me to witness our friends in other countries that we're allied with say that we no longer trust the US to be a formidable partner, because they will abandon ship. They're just gonna, leave us high and dry. And that's unfortunately a byproduct of what current leadership has done with their decision to withdraw the way that they did. And while I do not actually agree with the decision by the previous administration even to take the lead from Qatar and from Imran Khan in Pakistan to actually set up a meeting with the Taliban, because I think that legitimizing a terrorist organization by meeting with them is a very big mistake. It is even more unfortunate that we are continuing down a trajectory that has left us in a even more, I think, precarious situation than we were in before. And I would also like to add that America has, with this withdrawal, and again, I would like to see an end to endless wars, of course, but I think we all know history has shown that even when we withdraw, we end a war, we don't disengaged completely. So many Afghanis, so many people on the ground there have relied so heavily on America's presence as a deterrent as a deterrent for violence. There are people who have been translators, and they have given their lives and helped American personnel and other personnel in terms of navigating this very rough terrain that is over there in Afghanistan. And they were all left abandoned, and God knows what their fate is going to be. So I definitely have to say also, there was about, I think, years ago, 1,000, not even Hindus left in Afghanistan. I think that number is down to about 50, if anything. And I think there was even one Jew left in Afghanistan. I mean, it's so crazy to consider how there is such a lack of diversity, and there's no real freedom there. And so I just wanted to kind of say that my commitment to ensuring that these issues are continuously exposed, that the Hindu community diaspora is even more vocal in terms of standing up and staying strong in their convictions, because I will also say it's incredible how historically the Hindu community has withstood so much terror and attempts to delegitimize them, but they've been able to bend and to work with all the circumstances, and a resilient and truly beautiful culture that is constantly under attack in Western academia, unfortunately, with more left-leaning institutions. And this is a fight that we're all in together, and we will persevere, because goodness will always prevail, and light will always prevail over darkness. So thank you so much for putting this together and continuing to raise the alarm.
Thank you, Adelle. This is an interesting week, where it is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It is also the time when Afghanistan has now formally announced their government and declared victory. And it's also a time when this, for people who don't know about, although I think there are very few people who don't know this anymore, but there is also a conference, supposedly an academic conference, very little academic about it, but a conference taking place online. It's called Dismantling Global Hindutva. And we have been doing 3 weeks in a row, we've been doing our HinduLounge show on that topic. Now, for all those who have just joined us, who are listening to us for the first time, and who don't know what Hindutva is made up of word Hindu plus Tattva. Tattva means essence. So Hindutva is the essence of Hindu Dharma. And when we say that it is essence of Hindu Dharma, it is what it means to be a Hindu, or it is Hindu-ness. When you say that we want to dismantle Hindutva, what the people who are organizing this particular conference, what they're trying to actually say is they want to dismantle Hindu-ness. Okay, so it's a very cleverly crafted title, and a very and a date that is picked to send a message that this is what we are after. And they also, at the same time, we are deflecting the attention from the actual perpetrators of the terror on 9/11. So it's serving multiple purposes. So it's really, really interesting times that we live in, where the victims are now blamed as for the victimization that they've suffered. So I want to get, so that I start with you, but I want to get a sense from you as to how is this particular week, if you put it from the Hindu perspective, American Hindu perspective, what does this week tell you? And I have my own thoughts, but I'm going to hold off on that till the end. But what are your, I'll get reaction from all of you as to, what does this week tell, what do you think as American Hindu this week signifies?
So this week essentially is a band of academics managed by Pakistani proxies running a hate campaign against Hindus in American campuses, while another Pakistani asset responsible for bombing the Bamiyan Buddhas, directly responsible for ordering the attack on Bamiyan Buddhas in 2001, becomes the interim prime minister of Taliban-ruled Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. If I were to sum up this week in one sentence, that is it. It is 30,000 miles across the world. The events are happening, but essentially two Pakistani proxies. One is attacking Hindu Americans in American academia, 60 campuses in an online event, while another Pakistani proxy becomes the interim prime minister, a person who was directly responsible for ordering the bombing of the Bamiyan Buddhas. So that would be my one sentence description of how this week is panning out.
And Kishan?
Yeah, sorry. So I agree with what mentioned. Fortunately, it's Pakistan, China. We have radical leftists that will and unfortunately people on our own people, will side with a train of thought that may, I guess, is not conducive to a progressive society, even though they call themselves progressive. And the reality is that there is evil in the world. There are people that are willing to do other people harm, as Adelle mentioned. We see that throughout the global scale. It's not just, Pakistan, of course, has become the Ivy League, almost, if you want to call it that, terrorist training. It's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of the nature of what's going on in the world. And as I mentioned before, just looking at the world and where there's almost 94 different radical Islamic terrorist groups out there, that are just creating havoc on innocent minority groups, of all different religious demographics, including Muslims themselves, So those who we see this in Afghanistan, Afghanistan, with the recent takeover of the Taliban and the reemergence of the Taliban again, we see how destructive they are to those Afghans who have allied with the United States, partnered with the United States. And to Adelle's point, why should they trust? Why should anybody ever trust, the United States if this is what's going to happen moving forward, where we change the different regimes, so to speak, and regardless of your politics, we need to have a unifying platform of saying no to radical Islamic terrorists and terrorism, because that is ideally what terrorism is going. And as far as the next generation, they need to really understand historical implications, because they really don't know. If you look at the historical conquest of India, and Adelle, thank you for bringing that up. In the Indian Empire stretched from all the way from East Asia, Indochina, Laos, Indonesia, I should say, and then into Afghanistan, and even the parts of Iran were part of the Indian Empire. Look how that has crumbled because of the constant beating and abuses that we had taken from the Islamic conquest. Afghanistan, there's very few Hindus and Sikhs still left in the country, but it has become essentially an Islamic caliphate. Pakistan, basically the same thing. East Pakistan, Bangladesh, we are seeing how they treat minorities, whether they be Hindus, and the Hindus are the significant minority in Pakistan and Bangladesh. But not only the Hindus, but Christian, Buddhist, Zoroastrians, regardless of what religion they are second-class citizens. So my point is, simply we have to really get on the ball of educating the next generation as to what the historical implications are, because history has taught us what Islamic terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism is. History has shown us clearly what the implications are. And if we continue to allow the left to have the narrative and shape the narrative, I'm just afraid for my children and the next generation of children who will not understand and will not be prepared to deal with the onslaught of radical Islamic terrorism and the unfortunately left-wing radical school of thought, which is, like I said, not conducive to a progressive and well-meaning society.
Thank you, Christian. Adelle?
Thank you. I really feel that what this week symbolizes is the radical Islamists' commitment to those who are anti-West, those who are anti-Hindu, those who are anti-everything that we here at this conference, and so many of people who follow and agree with us believe in. It is their renewed commitment to trying to defeat us. It 100% the way that they went about everything, executing it, the timing, the day they used to establish their Islamic Taliban government. All of it is a renewed commitment to defeating the West, frankly. And this battle is far from over. And so we do have to be able to look at history a little bit, frankly, to see what mistakes were made, to see what went wrong, to look at how they've behaved in the past. But I think we're in a very unique situation now, too, where this is an unprecedented time, where we can't really look to history necessarily as a full gauge and a full reference, because so much is different now that individuals like those in the Taliban have actually unfortunately been legitimized in a way that we didn't think was going to occur. And so we're navigating new waters, so to speak. And that's why I think it's so important, as one of the audience members stated, for the Hindu community as well, to really not be silent anymore. I know that culturally, we've been told that we have to just, sort of keep our heads down and not to fight back. But no, it's time to actually do the opposite. It's time to pick up, your arms, to use your voice, to be unafraid, and to take to social media, take to your communities, to contact your local members of Congress, senators, local school boards, anything domestically, and make sure that you have a presence and that your voice is heard, and band together, because we got to be there for each other. Honestly, it's going to be a big battle ahead, and if there's anything that we can do here, obviously myself, with AJ, sorry, Sean, all of us, we're all here to help, to be, a point of reference, and any questions that you have, how we can be helpful, we'll definitely, we're here. And so.
Thank you, Adelle. So let me offer a slightly different perspective. And I think that that today is actually a new, I look at this 9/11, and I think that for the American Hindus, this is actually a new beginning. I think, just when the conference, the Dismantle Global Hindutva Conference was announced, all the Hindus in America, not just the people who are active in the Hindu organizations, but all the Hindus woke up to the fact that actually there is a concerted effort to make Hindus shed their Hindu identity. And when we sent out the signature campaign, we started the first signature campaign, we got 170,000 individual signatures being sent to different universities. And when we sent out a letter to the mandirs and mandir executives on behalf of our HMC initiative, we got over 110 mandirs and Hindu organizations and 900 temple executives outside of that. So 100 plus other 800 Hindu mandir executives and organization executives to sign on that campaign. I know Mihir is watching this, and Mihir, feel free to join us in the panel as well. You're welcome to, and so is Rakhi. I think, and Amitabh Mittal was here, but I see only Rakhi and Mihir, and they're both welcome to join the panel to chime in. But really, when Mihir and HAF did the signature campaign, they sent out close to 1 million signatures. I know Kona did the same thing. So all the Hindu organizations individually have done a lot of effort, but outside of Hindu organizations, advocacy organizations, individuals who never thought that they would be ever active in Hindu advocacy woke up and they're doing their own efforts. I mean, right now, in addition to this particular webinar that is going on, there are 4 other webinars on the same topic that are going on. And they're all encouraged. I encourage all of them to do this. This is really actually good. This shows that the sleeping Hindu has finally awakened. And there was a time when we could not hold a conference at Rutgers. We had to do the meeting, just a Kashmiri speaker could not last year, a year before last, could not speak on the campus of Rutgers University. They had to hold the event outside of campus. And today, I think that after this event, the Hindu students are going to be assertive enough that on any campus, they will not be deplatformed. They will be able to speak on the platform because Hindu students have become more confident of what they can do and what they want to achieve. And the same is true with, 20 years later, if you look at the Hindu academicians, there are multiple efforts, multiple letters written by academicians. Generally, the academicians, many of the Hindu academicians are in STEM areas, in science and technology and business schools and others, but not in the liberal arts. And these people are mostly heads down academics. They don't get involved. And today they are involved. The mandirs, and I mentioned mandirs a little bit earlier, mandirs never speak up on Hindu issues. But today, over 110 mandirs asserted their Hindutva identity. And that is a positive. So I think as much as we see the news items that are coming out of Afghanistan, and we say that, look, I mean, no Hindu is left in Afghanistan. By the way, the last 50 Hindus left in the last 3-4 days. The last Jew has left Afghanistan now. And that now people are thinking that, look, if there are no Hindus left in Afghanistan, what is the next country that Hindus are not going to be there? We have seen this in Uganda. We have seen this in other places where Hindus are picked and they're driven out. So today Hindus are thinking, in America, at least in Canada, they're saying that, what is next? And the same with mandirs. They're thinking, what is next? We have seen the temples being vandalized across America. But what is next? And that question is making all the Hindus stand up, make notice, and be advocates. This is, to me, the Dismantle Global Hindutva Conference is really the biggest motivator for Hindu community in America. Utsada, we are at time. I know Anil Agarwalji has raised his hand.
I just wanted to point something out. Ajay, I just wanted to add something to your comment before we move to responding to audience comments. Just wanted to reiterate the fact that in the last 3,500 years of recorded history of Afghanistan, there has never been a time when there was no Hindu in Afghanistan. I repeat, 3,500 years of recorded history of Afghanistan. There has never been a time until now when no Hindu was left in Afghanistan. There was Hindus there who survived the Mahmud Ghaznavi invasion. There are Hindus there who survived the Taimur invasion. They survived through so much tragedy, so much hardship, so much forced conversion. I mean, Afghanistan, for most of its 70% of its recorded history, has been a Hindu or a Buddhist nation. Islam has been only there for less than 20% of the time. So that is the reality, and the hypocrisy of all these campuses across America, where there are the departments of South Asian studies. Not one of those departments is holding a conference or an event about this epoch-changing moment in the history of the region, when for the first time in 3,500 years, there will be no Hindu left in Afghanistan. Instead, they are targeting Hindus. If the people in the audience who had any empathy for these academics, for these institutions, and the people who are hosting these events, if they have any empathy for them, ask them this question, and you will get your answer where they're coming from.
Thank you, Utsada. Utsada, I know that we are at time, but I want to give, audience an opportunity to ask questions. I would suggest that the best way to do that would be to go to the Q&A and ask the questions. We will end this in about 10 minutes. So I'm just going to leave it open for about 10 minutes for anyone who would have any, if they have any questions.
we were having a lot of comments. The comment section was super active.
And again, I want to make sure that that there are a lot of Hindu activists also who are listening to this, and so if I would give if Mihir or Rakhi or someone wants to be on the panel, they're welcome to join. But everyone, please ask. If you have any questions, you can ask. As I said, we're going to leave it open for about 10 minutes. So that if you want to pick up something
we have a question from Aarti.
So let me invite Mihir to this. He's been gracious enough to join. As everyone knows, Mihir is the founder of Hindu American Foundation. So Mihir, welcome to the panel.
Yeah, Ajay, thanks. Ajay, the only thing I'd like to say is, VHP is putting on a great service to the community. It's been great hearing from Kishanji, Adelle, Utsav, and I really encourage everyone here to donate to VHPA. It's really important to have a strong Hindu voice and organization that has infrastructure to fight this huge apparatus that Adelle has clearly identified. So I hope everyone can do that. I know you're not making an appeal now, but I'd like to make that on behalf of the group.
Thank you, Mihir. Can never thank you enough for all that you have done for Hindu advocacy. I remember you started as a high school student, and you're still going strong. And I remember talking to you when you were in 12th grade, and you were as enthusiastic then as you are today. And your contribution is just amazing things that you have done when it comes to advocacy, for Hindu advocacy, and as a student leader in past. So thank you.
No problem. And I'll be making a 5,001 donation right now, and hopefully others will join in.
Thank you, Mihir. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
So we have a question from Aarti Kaushal Chopra.
And also from Anil Agarwal ji, we have 2 questions, and from Mini Saria, we have 1 question. So go ahead in any particular order.
So RTG asked, how can we get in touch with Afghan communities and build a common relationship and partnership in addressing the threats? RTG, we are already working on that. In fact, Hindu Pact is going to launch a campaign that is going to be specific to Afghanistan in the next week. Keep an eye out for it. As I noted, this is the first time in the entire history of Afghanistan that it will be without its Hindus. And as Americans who were very closely watching this situation, and as a country, America, who was there for 20 years, we have a role to play. No other country can make things happen there. Actually, even America cannot make things happen there anymore, but at least we can try. So it's very important that we work on this. So I also wanted to take a question from Mini Sarlaji. Mini ji says, would like to comment on the 2 weapons these anti-Hindu forces use. Mini ji, please write it in a comment and we will read it. We are looking for questions. If you could answer these questions. Okay, so Mini ji has typed it. So I'm trying to be in real time here. Do you see Mini ji's comments, Ajay bhai? Or
yes, would like to comment on the 2 weapons, 2 weapons that these anti-Hindu forces use. And that's all she has written. So let's take it in the order, Utsada. And I think Anil ji has 2 questions. Hindus have to follow Sikhs and get united, and VHPI should approach Hindu entrepreneurs in high positions. Many of them are billionaires. So those are the Anil ji, you made a good point. I think we should definitely get all Hindus involved. Everyone has something to contribute. I mean, some people can contribute financially, other people can contribute intellectually, and some other Hindus can contribute in grassroots level advocacy. There's no area where there's no one person who will do all the but we need entire community coming together and doing things together. Miniji, if you have questions, please type it in the Q&A. I really hope that people, I know there are a lot of things going on in the chat. It's hard to monitor it over there, but please type it in the chat. So that I don't see the question in the Q&A. She might have typed it in the chat. It's somewhat difficult to monitor that. I don't see the
question in the chat either. I see a comment. So we'll just go to Charu Shivkumar. He has a question. how can we reach out to get this message to Hindu youth in high schools? I run a youth camp and this will be helpful. So this is very important. One of the reasons why our campuses are hosting the anti-Hindutva event is because the people who are hosting those events are not trying to influence you and me. They know that we know enough history, we have enough knowledge, we have enough understanding of the globe, of the geopolitics, that we will not change our minds. The people they are hosting these events for is the next generation of American Hindus. And many of them are reaching out to them and succeeding. That's the biggest tragedy. On September 11, you will see Hindu American youth, a few of them, who actually empathize with the radicalists. And that has been our failure as a community. But it is changing very fast. The Hindus, as all of our speakers described, are waking up. They have their backs to the wall. And I think one of the efforts that we have to utilize today is to use the technology that we have. We have resources like the show. We have HinduPact, we have infographics, we have detailed analysis in terms of writers who write books, in terms of articles. Please share it with the younger generation. And please be rational, because rationality has its own strength. So if we are able to provide them truth rationally, I think they can relate to it. And I think it's an educational effort that has to continue for decades to come. It's not a one-day effort. The other side has spent decades running their propaganda. It will take us at least a few years to counter it. So that would be my response, Charuji, to your question.
Suman Sharmaji has said that should VHPA conduct a similar conference to counter what these organizers are trying to do. So stay tuned, Sumanji. We are working on a similar and a much more extensive conference on Hindu phobia and what we call Hindu Dvesha, which is Hindu phobia and Hindutva. It is going to be in the month of October. We are working out the details, and we are doing it in partnership with another Hindu organization called Dharma Civilization Foundation. So we have a major initiative on Hindu phobia. It's very academically oriented. We have two initiatives in the area of, in the anti-defamation area. One is our existing effort, which is going on for the last 25 years, which is much more towards the popular culture and misrepresentation of Hindu icons, idols, and murtis, culture in popular media and how it is misused. It is under the umbrella American Hindus Against Defamation. So the team that is working on American Hindus Against Defamation is partnering with Dharma Civilization Foundation on this conference as a Hindu phobia and Hindutva conference that is coming up in the month of October. It is going to be very academically oriented, and it is going to be a counter to the Dismantle Global Hindutva Conference. So please stay tuned. It's a multi-day event and it's extensively planned. Again, it's AHAD and the Dharma Civilization Foundation partnership.
So Ajay, we have a question from Manik Bhujwala. Is VHP doing something to prevent violence against caste oppressed people in India so as to blunt criticism about Hindutva assumptions? My response, Manik ji, would be that it is not about blunting criticism. Leave that aside. VHP in India, and I have to say this very specifically here, VHP America is not part of VHP in India. It's an independent non-profit 501c3 organization, but VHP in India has for decades, since its inception, worked very hard to remove all kinds of social discrimination that have crept up in the Indian society, including training temple priests from all jatis. The only organization in India which did it since the 1970s. So there is a social movement from the Hindu community that has worked very hard, not just in this generation, in previous generations as well. The sad part, though, is that those people who criticize Hindutva are also the people who say that VHP is trying to create a homogenized, casteless Hindu society. So they cannot have it both ways. Either they can blame VHP or Hindutva people for being casteist, or they have to admit that Hindutva people are trying to create a more uniform, more united, and a less discriminatory Hindu society, which they blame Hindutva of being homogeneous. You cannot have it both.
So the one slight correction. Everyone is, any Hindu is Hindutvawadi, because Hindutva is essence of Hindu Dharma. So that said, but the people they say that, oh, these are people who are following the political Hindutva, whatever that means. If you look at it, and again, I want to make absolutely clear that VHP America is an independent American organization. We draw the inspiration from common set of Hindu philosophies, as VHP in Bharat does, as VHP in Australia does, or UK does, or anywhere in the world does, but not just VHP. These are the same guiding principles that guide not just the VHP, but many, many Hindu organizations and many individuals. So there's nothing unique about just VHPA following these Hindu precepts, whether they are Ekam Satavi Prabhuda Vadanti, the truth is one, but the sages call it by multiple names, or Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the entire universe is one unified family. Now, having said that, people have accused that there are certain organizations that are casteist. And one of the organizations that people mention as being caste is meant for upper class people, and all of them are organizations such as RSS in India and VHPA. Now look at the people who went to RSS and who are occupying the positions of power. Today, the president of India comes from the so-called Dalit community, and he is also RSS Swayamsevak. Today, the Prime Minister of India comes from the other backward class community, and he is a lifelong Swayamsevak and a lifelong Pracharak. And so these are the kinds of, if you can say that, well, these are the people who are, casteist and they don't respect certain caste and all that, no true Hindu will have the differences of birth-based privilege in their heart. Okay, no Hindu would have that. And that is really important for everyone to understand, that these attacks that come are only political, and they're only meant to create fissures within the Hindu community. They have nothing to do with reality.
Ajay, I would like to add, they are not even political, they're geopolitical, because the people who are projecting these attacks and the people who are funding these attacks, you have to just peel the first layer of activists, and you will see so many of them end up outside the boundaries of what is present day India. And many of them actually end up not too far from the boundary of India in a place called Rawalpindi. So it is not even political, it's geopolitical in nature.
Yeah. And any time there is violence against any innocent person, a true Hindu is going to stand up for it. I think Utsoda, Vannaji has a question, how to create an anti-terrorist coalition across the board that includes organizations and politicians. It's critical need of the hour. And let me bring Adelle into this, and so that you and Adelle can both maybe answer this question. And I think there are a lot of questions where I think we are at the end of our time. So maybe make this a last question, and we can close after this. So go ahead in any particular order. Adelle, you can go first, and then Utsoda, you can go next and close out the program for today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there is please feel free to reach out. I mean, there's writing local members of Congress, literally putting together, and we can help, you organize a letter to write, mass letters that can be, more generic, but are very, very targeted and focused on specific goals. I think the key here is that many members of Congress need to be educated. They rely heavily on their staff, and oftentimes their staff are, believe it or not, they get information from community members who are providing them with information about what's going on locally. So we are literally the resources and tools for them to be able to know what's happening and going on. So writing letters, reaching out to them, calling them up. And I will also say, I'd be happy also to help. We'd be happy to help you identify certain members of Congress who, just because they appear to be Indian or Hindu, are not actually fighting for our cause. There are certain members, and I will name one, Ro Khanna, for example. He is not a friend of our movement. He is not a friend of our cause, unfortunately. And individuals like that also need to be exposed, and you need to be critical of them, because they're the ones who are actually creating more obstacles for us in what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and actually hurting the Hindutva, to be honest with you. So just reaching out. And I'm sure that Utsavji also has, I'd love to, please, whatever else you can recommend. You've already done some amazing work in terms of reaching out to members of Congress, but increasingly we're going to be also reaching out to these members of Congress and hopefully having more events where we can have individuals who are friends of in Congress, who are friends of our cause and our vision, to be more emboldened and highlighted so that their voices can be even louder.
Thank you, Adelle. Utsada?
Thank you, Vandanaji, for that question. And thank you, Adelle, for that very clear and precise answer. I would only like to add that, as much advocacy is needed to reach out to the Congress, to the elected communities, because they make legislations and they make laws. So in a country where constitutional provisions are needed to be changed or needed to be modified to get better understanding for what we stand for and why it is important to fight terrorism in a united manner, we have to go and reach out to the legislator. But before that, it is important that we ourselves are empowered and informed when we do so. One of the concerns that I have experienced in my 20 years of advocacy and activism work is that many times Indian Americans or Hindu Americans have a lot of reach with many of these lawmakers, but they give some amount of money to them as well. But you will be appalled to see that the best they sometimes do is take a picture and put it in their living room. And that is a lost opportunity. And that is a lost opportunity because there is so much that needs to be done for the American Hindu community and the Hindu community globally. And I think this is why it is important that what Adelle mentioned and what many of our speakers here said, that organizations like Hindu Pact, and there are other organizations similar to us, we all need your support in terms of preparing a very good quality of intellectual property that is very convincing and very informative to the lawmakers. Before we end today, I want to plug one of our Hindu Pact projects called Chingari. And this is a project that can actually address many of the issues that we are discussing here. Chingari is a project where young Hindu Americans are coming together to support the Hindu girls in Pakistan, the Hindu and other minority girls in Pakistan, who are sometimes married off at the age of 12. The third or fourth wife or the second or third wife of a Muslim who is 20 years older than him. This is officially done in Pakistan. Every year, 1,000 of these young girls are married off and forcibly converted to Islam. Again, none of these academic institutions that are holding Hindu-phobic events ever talked about it. But Hindu Pact's Chingari project has started talking about it. It's led by young American Hindus. So support us with projects like this. Help us take it to the lawmakers. Maybe help us bring a resolution. There are so many things we can do to address these situations, and I think we are just getting started here. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Ajay Bhai. This is just the beginning. Work with us, support us, and we can be successful again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Utsada. I really want to take this time to thank you. And I cannot thank Krishanda enough. I think this was, what you said was really, really touching. It was, I know you've gone through a lot, but what you have talked today and the way you presented it, I think is inspiration to all the people who have been who have, for all the people to learn from and to empathize with the victims and to make sure that they learn this history so that they do not relive it, and not just they, but not their children or grandchildren have to relive this history. And that is why your statements and your talk was so powerful. I cannot thank you enough. Adelle, thank you for joining us. You provided a perspective which was unique, and it's very helpful to have different perspectives. And you brought in a lot of substance and great perspective. I've already gotten text messages complimenting the great presentation that you made today and the answers to the questions that you gave. So thank you very much for joining. And we'll continue working together. Utsada, I don't know how you did this today. I know that you've gone through this really, really difficult day, and in just 4 hours. I mean, it's not even a day. And all I can say is, Utsada, your your dad will be very proud of what you're doing. What you have already accomplished, he already knows, both in architecture as well as in Hindu advocacy. And he will be proud of you for what you're doing today and what you'll continue to do. You have the unique talents and ability, and we thank your parents and we thank you for what you have done. So stay strong. I know it is not an easy day for you, but you still chose to be here despite of my telling you many times, please do not do this today. So I commend your dedication. I commend your commitment, and just stay strong and cherish the good memories of your father. Thank you again for joining us, Sada. And thanks everyone. Thank you, Kishan. Thank you, Adelle. And thank you for all those who watched today. We will be putting up this version on YouTube and all the other social media channels. But thank you very much for joining, and namaste.